now. As I said in my introduction, 30 years ago I was arrested in Iraq, and the circumstances were that I was there with a group called the Gulf Peace Team, which initially had a camp on the border between the two armies as an attempt at a civilian intervention to stop the invasion. I didn't take part in that bit. I thought it was doomed to failure. And in fact, what happened was that the Iraqis simply sent along a few buses and took them back into Baghdad once the bombing started. But the group continued and became a kind of blockade breaking group. And after a couple of events, there was a peace march through Palestine and being arrested by the Israelis and stuff. Anyway, I ended up in Iraq, and I was doing this survey of children's hospitals heading north from Baghdad up into Kurdistan. And I ended up trying to go to a camp at a place called Halabja, which was a very sensitive place because it was the place that had been bombed with chemical weapons a couple of years before by the Iraqis. Right? There were about 5,000 Kurdish civilians killed. So it was a bit sensitive perhaps for me to go up there, but I had Iraqi government papers. But, I guess they could be forged. Anyway, I was on my way up there and I was arrested. I and a Kurdish guy who fortunately got off. I was held for about 12 hours. I was initially in Suleimaniyah, which is the local city, but then I was taken in a car at machine gun point to the interrogation centre in Kirkuk, which was the main interrogation centre for Kurdistan as a whole. And I was interrogated there for about 8 hours. I wasn't tortured, but I didn't know whether I was going to be or not. It had a big effect on me for quite a few years. At one point, thank you very much. At one point, they took me out into a guard room while we were waiting for this car. And they put me in this guard room. I didn't know what was going on. And they brought this other guy in. And he was clearly Kurdish. He had Kurdish trousers, which are quite distinctive. And he was sat there in the room with me. And he was shaking. His cheeks were shaking. He'd been caught that morning. The copper, plainclothes cop later told me that he'd been caught that morning with thousands and thousands of Iraqi dinars. And I think we can guess what happened to him. And he knew what was going to happen to him. It took me a few years to start to find a way to deal with this stuff. And eventually I was on a protest at Stradbroke Island near Brisbane. And I met a woman who had been on one of the Greenpeace vessels that had gone to the Murrow Atoll. And she'd been arrested by the French and thrown into a radioactive pool. And we found that we were able to talk about these things together because they were kind of a similar degree of intensity perhaps, or separation from what other activists had experienced. And I ended up writing a song because of being able to talk about it a bit with this woman, Kate Leckie. So this is it. It's called Song to a Frightened Man Across a Room. I first saw you in the guard room, the interrogation centre in Suleimaniyah in Kurdistan. After the Gulf War, they took me in to see you. They asked me if I knew you. You had been arrested with thousands of dinars. My carelessness had led the Iraqis to arrest me on the road to Halabja. Question for some hours, then they took me to the guard room and left us there together to could use. A doctor's wage at that time was 10 dinars monthly. In Baghdad, in the destruction after the Gulf War, and you'd been caught with thousands in what's the bundle 50s. You must have known the risk you took when you walked out that day. You were quite short and dumpy, your hair was thin and wispy, your eyes were greyish blue, I think, though I sat across the room. Your Kurdish trousers hung there, your shirt tight across your belly. Your darting eyes were begging, what harm could I do you? You didn't sit up proudly, you didn't sit defiant. Your courage lay just in the fact you could sit up at all. Your every tiny movement betrayed your inner panic. The quivering of your cheeks made clear you full well knew the score. There'd be no rousing speeches, there'd be no comrades with you. As they routinely tortured you, you would have screamed alone. There'd be no calls for courage, as they bent you for your bullet. There'd be no one there for you to sing your spirit home. There was no way I could have helped you, no way that I could think of. A frightened outsider in the hands of a murderous power. But I've spent years now hoping, though I'll never know the answer, that I didn't make things worse for you in your final hours. I am not a brave man, I've no particular courage. Anger doesn't help a lot and tears don't last for long. What could I say or scribble to make more than the slightest difference? What use are tears or courage, and what use is this song? What could I say or scribble to make more than the slightest difference? What use are tears or courage, and what use is this song?